You just got a notification. Someone you follow posted a black square with a birth year and a death year. You paused for half a second. You typed 2 words. You kept scrolling. That is how you grieve now. But for most of human history, that is not how grief worked at all. The real answer is far stranger. Your ancestors did not scroll past death. They buried it, painted it, wore it, and sometimes carried it with them for years. Grief feels private to you. It feels like something that happens inside your chest, alone, in the dark. But grief was never meant to be private. It was built by evolution to be loud. Think about that for a second. Why would a survival machine like the human brain waste so much energy on sadness? Sadness slows you down. It makes you stop hunting, stop gathering, stop moving. In a world where slowing down could get you killed, grief should have been deleted by natural selection a long time ago. It wasn't. That tells you something. Grief survived because it did something useful. Anthropologist Paul Rosen has spent decades studying how humans process loss and disgust, 2 emotions that sit closer together in the brain than you'd expect. His research suggests that grief rituals didn't just comfort the living, they reorganized the group. A death forced everyone to renegotiate who did what, who protected whom, who fed whom. Grief was not a private malfunction. It was a public reset button. Go back 100,000 years. At a site called Kafse, in what is now Israel, archaeologists found a child buried with deer antlers pressed into their hands. Someone placed those antlers there on purpose. Someone knelt down, arranged small bones around a small body, and walked away, changed. That is not an accident. That is one of the earliest pieces of evidence that early humans understood something. You still understand today. A person can stop being alive and keep on mattering. Neanderthals did this too. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, researchers found a burial with pollen clustered around the skeleton in patterns that suggested flowers, though this theory has been debated for years. Whether or not those exact flowers were placed with intention, the burial itself was. Bodies were positioned. Bodies were covered. Bodies were treated differently than trash, differently than leftovers, differently than things. Here's the part that should stop you. This was happening before language as you know it existed, before writing, before agriculture, before cities. Grief is older than your ability to explain grief. So why did it survive? Psychologist John Archer, who studied the evolution of grief for decades, proposed something that sounds almost too simple. Grief exists because attachment exists. If you are wired to bond with another person so deeply that their presence changes your stress hormones, your heart rate, your sense of safety, then losing them has to register as a crisis. Not a minor inconvenience, a crisis. Your body cannot tell the difference between losing a limb and losing the person who made you feel safe. Both feel like damage. That is why grief hurts in your chest, and not just your head. Your brain uses overlapping circuitry for physical pain and social pain. When researchers ran brain scans on people looking at photos of someone they'd lost, the same regions activated as when people experience physical injury. Grief is not a metaphor. It is your nervous system treating loss like a wound. Ancient humans didn't have this science, but they had rituals that acted like medicine anyway. Look at how differently cultures handled the body itself. In parts of ancient China, elaborate tomb goods were buried with the dead, food, tools, sometimes entire miniature armies, because death was not seen as an ending, but as a relocation. In ancient Egypt, the entire economy of the afterlife depended on preservation. Mummification wasn't about denial. It was about logistics. If you believed someone was going somewhere, you packed their bags. Compare that to sky burial traditions practiced in parts of the Himalayas, where bodies were left exposed for vultures and other scavengers, not out of neglect, but out of a completely different understanding of what a body is once the person is gone. A body stops being sacred and starts being useful again, feeding the mountain that once fed the person. None of these approaches agree with each other. And that's the point. Grief rituals were never really about the dead. They were about giving the living something to do with an unbearable feeling. structure where there was chaos, motion where there was paralysis. Here's the twist you probably didn't expect. Public mourning wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. In many hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, a death triggered an immediate redistribution of resources. Who gets the dead person's tools? Who takes over their responsibilities? Who adopts their children? Grief rituals force these questions into the open instead of letting them fester as silent power struggles. Wailing, chanting, communal mourning. These weren't just about sadness. They were about making loss visible enough that the entire group had to respond together. You still do a version of this. You just don't call it that. When someone dies today, people show up with casseroles. They organize funerals. They post publicly instead of privately, even when it feels strange to announce something so personal. Some evolutionary psychologists argue this is the same ancient mechanism wearing modern clothes. Announcing loss forces a community response. It signals, without needing to say it directly, I need support. And the group, on some old evolutionary level, still answers. But something has changed too. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Modern grief has been pushed into a strange corner. You get maybe a few days off work. You're expected to be functional again within a week or two. Extended mourning, the kind that lasted months in ancient and traditional societies, now gets pathologized. If you're still deeply grieving 6 months later, some people start to worry something is wrong with you. But nothing is wrong with you. You are running ancient software on a modern operating system that was never designed to support it. Anthropologist Renato Rosaldo, after losing his own wife suddenly, wrote about how grief reshaped his understanding of anger, of rage even, in mourning rituals he had once studied clinically as an outsider. He realized he had misunderstood grief his entire career because he had never actually lived inside it. Intensity was not performance. It was proportional to the size of the bond that had been severed. That reframes everything, doesn't it? The size of your grief is not a measurement of how broken you are. It's a measurement of how attached you were, how safe someone made you feel, how much of your nervous system had quietly rearranged itself around their presence. Ancient humans understood this instinctively, even without a word for nervous system or attachment or cortisol. They built rituals long enough, loud enough, and communal enough to match the size of the wound. They didn't rush grief. They didn't schedule it into a 3-day bereavement policy. They let it take the shape it needed to take, because they knew, on some old evolutionary level, that a wound this size doesn't close on command. So tonight, when you see another black square, with 2 years and a dash between them, and you type 2 words and keep scrolling, remember what that gesture actually is. It's not shallow. It's ancient. It's the same impulse that made someone place deer antlers in a child's hands 100,000 years ago. A refusal to let a person disappear without the world noticing they were here. You just got a notification. And somewhere underneath the screen, underneath the algorithm, underneath the 2 seconds you spent on it, your ancestors are still there, kneeling beside you, telling you it's allowed to hurt this much.